Okay, I'm gonna make struggle worth it for you. The struggle is real. That is a common thing you hear all the time. Actually, I'm hoping by the end of this episode, I feel like it's an important one. Hello, and welcome to Bless Your Heart Podcast, Season 2. I'm your host, Laura Hartnett, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about struggle, okay? And I'm just going to dive right into it because honestly, one of my pet peeves is having this whole long introduction. So we're just going to go for it, okay? Struggle. The struggle is real. That is a common thing you hear all the time. How are you doing? Oh, if we're being honest, the struggle is real. And what my goal is today is to reframe this whole idea of struggle in your mind and not make it such a bad thing. Okay. Actually, I'm hoping by the end of this episode that whenever you think about struggling, you actually see it as an opportunity for you and an opportunity that you want to embrace. Okay. I'm going to make struggle worth it for you. I know, I get it. This is a whole big thing. That's a big promise, right? Because pretty much everything within us is trying to avoid the struggle. It is trying to avoid pain, right? You mix that with the way that the world has taught us that the whole goal is to avoid pain, then yeah, there's going to be a natural inclination to say Laura, I'm sorry. That's great. I'm so glad that you feel enlightened. But you know what? That's the last thing I want to spend my time on is learning and living in the struggle. But you know what? Let me explain something to you. Have you been able to escape it? Because if you're not willing to invest into kind of understanding the struggle and learning about it, the opposite of what you're doing is you're investing in the escaping it, right? And while you're trying to invest in escaping it, the truth of the matter is there literally isn't any way on this planet you're going to be able to fully escape it, okay? So what if I can help you reframe the idea of struggle and I can make it seem like it's not so daunting and it's not so bad? Are you willing to go through that? Okay. Well, then let's go ahead and start. So when you really think about it, the way that the world has really programmed us, for the sake of capitalism, let's just be honest, for the sake of capitalism, we are willing to trade money for the end of our pain, right? When you look at marketing is, all right, here are the steps. You create a pain point. What is it your target audience is experiencing? What pain are they experiencing? And you are going to create a product that ends that pain, okay? And they're going to trade you money for your product that ends their pain, okay? Because it is very primal in us for us to want to end pain, right? So that's many times why we've now taken something and just really ran amok with it, where now our whole entire idea is struggle is bad, pain is bad, and we have been programmed to try to eliminate it completely. And we're actually trying to escape it, and we're trying to just throw money by any means to end it, okay? But the truth of the matter is when you really start looking at life, when you really start understanding how life came into existence, how we ourselves came into existence, it was actually all tied to struggle. It was all after an experience of struggle. Struggle is what creates growth, and growth is necessary for purpose, for fulfillment, for feeling alive. In contrast, let's look at the opposite. Okay, let's look at the opposite. And the opposite of pain, right, is pleasure. And that is something that we can all relate to as something that we're seeking, not just because we've been programmed, but it's also within us, right? That's the reason why marketing works, is because this naturally is something we're not wanting to have, is pain. So we're seeking pleasure, right? And whenever people have gone through this whole pleasure-seeking experience, the word dopamine is always tossed around. You hear it, especially now it's kind of used as a buzzword, right? Dopamine hits, you're doom scrolling on Instagram to have these little short, cheap thrills, these cheap hits of dopamine, okay? But I'm actually going to explain to you the science behind a lot of that. And I geek out on this stuff. I geek out on it because as I started educating myself, really learning about this, getting certified in neuroplasticity and neuroscience, I really started understanding how all of these are linked together to create either a numb-filled life, a just where you are just existing, this like death, or this fulfilling life when you're using these hormones well, and you yourself can create these hormones within yourself. Like it's fascinating. So whenever you're kind of, going through this whole pleasure seeking, and a lot of people, like, whether it be like, let's talk about, addiction, right? Like whenever you are creating these dopamine hits and you're going through maybe an affair, shopping, all of these things that create this feeling. What people often use, the word that's used most when describing how they felt during these experiences is they felt alive, okay? Esther Perel, she's amazing. She talks in her TED Talk like about having an affair, like this whole anatomy of having an affair. The reason why is because people felt alive. So what that tells me is that there's something in us that feels numb, that feels dead inside. And when you really look at nature and how nature works, life actually comes not from pleasure. It comes from the struggle and then the dopamine hit that's earned after the struggle. So dopamine is necessary, but if you shorten the process and you don't have all like the precursors, like all of the other hormones that lead up to this aftermath of dopamine as your end result, you're actually shortening the process and you're actually creating a bigger problem for yourself chemically in your own mind. So when you look at nature, let's start back with that. When you look at like a baby bird and the way that a baby bird comes into existence, and whenever it's hatching out of its egg, it has to go through this struggle, this process of pecking at it, of trying to wiggle its way out. And it's like, yeah, what if the mama bird could just come in and just, and it's there and it's fine. No, it's through the struggle that it gains the strength in its respiratory system to be able to exist outside the egg. It gains the blood flow through its wings to create its muscles in order to exist outside the egg. The same thing with a butterfly, with a chrysalis. Like if you were to help that butterfly out and it wasn't able to go through the struggle, then it wouldn't be able to break out of this and exist and fly. It has to do that and extend its wings and force the blood flow through it in order for it to create the muscles necessary to fly. I mean, look at our own bodies. Like our own bodies, why is it so painful for us to create muscle? It has to break down in order to rebuild. It's this struggle that we go through in order for us to become stronger, for growth to happen. You look at trees going through wind, these types of experiences, this adversity that it has to go through. It's what grows the roots deeper. It's what creates these roots underneath the ground. Actually, scientists have taken trees and they put them, all other variables stayed the same except for they removed wind, and the trees ended up dying. So it's through this effect of adversity, it's through this struggle that life actually exists. And you see it, and there's, literally look throughout our whole entire world. There's actually I was looking it up and I was fascinating about just the way volcanoes, after erupting, create some of the most fertile soil, all of these other things that exist as a result of the struggle is just fascinating. So what that tells me is that in reality, we can spend our whole life trying to escape it. And honestly, a ton of energy is extended and, put out because we are trying so hard to escape this reality. I mean, in the truth of the matter is if I'm a betting man, am I going to invest in that being a solution, or am I going to invest in really just learning and coming up with the tools that make the struggle not such a bad thing and understanding why it's necessary? So let me kind of go over, I want to kind of go over the science of struggle and what really actually happens to us internally whenever we are struggling. Like, we all know about muscles and how in order to build muscles, like, you have to go through like the pain of like, working out and all those things. But in the end, you get this major dopamine hit whenever you finally see these results, right? And those are after a series of all these other, like your body, having cortisol and having all these other hormones that are going through it. So whenever you are going through growth, like, let's first talk about like neuroplasticity and exactly what that means. Basically, neuroplasticity is your body, your brain, right? Your brain's ability to grow and create new neurons in your brain in order to create growth. Okay. So that can be a good thing and that could be a bad thing. It depends on where you are choosing to grow your brain. Which brain are you choosing to grow? People can get stuck in a survival pattern because they are constantly, really refocusing and growing more neurons in this other, part of their system of their brain. And then if you're wanting to grow parts of your brain, your pleasure center, where you're constantly activating that and you're creating habits that are constantly activating that part of your brain, then that's going to be the brain that takes over, because there's literally more neurons that are grown in that part of your brain. Same is true if you want to be somebody who makes really good decisions, that is, highly intelligent, you keep your calm, you're able to stay grounded. Through the habits and the conscious efforts that you're making, you are growing the part of your brain where all of this exists. Your ability to stay regulated, your ability to stay calm, your ability to use your higher thinking, your problem-solving brain. That's in your prefrontal cortex. If you are creating neurons and focusing more on those neurons that are in creating those through conscious habits and creating habits that nurture that part of your brain, then that's where you're going to be growing neurons. And that's what part of your brain is going to start becoming more activated. And you're completely in charge of this. You can do this on your own. Like, you have the ability to basically decide what kind of brain you want to have. I mean, it's fascinating. So how that works as far as, growth goes, in order for you to have growth, the actual part of your brain that creates these new neurons, like the hormones that have to exist are adrenaline, cortisol, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's another fun thing. This is like the fertilizer for your neurons. And of course, then earn dopamine. Okay, this is the process that happens to create these neurons. And what I found so interesting is of course, adrenaline, like when you're an adrenaline junkie, that's always, fun. But whenever you hear cortisol, you hear it, it's often referred to as like the stress hormone, and there's definitely a negative connotation. And of course, it's because, stress on your body throughout a very extended period of time, not in balance, can wreak havoc on your body. So of course, whenever you're constantly at this stress state, but at the same time, I think we've made it such a villain. I think because we're just like cortisol, like people are highly stressed because, society's gone through really a lot lately, between the pandemic and just our economy and, the recession and all of these types of things. We're definitely, we've faced the struggle, right? So our body has definitely pumped out a bunch of cortisol. And if we don't know how to regulate ourselves and cope with all of this, then we can get stuck in this endless loop of constantly fight or flight. And we never get to experience the balance of the other side, the contrast, the dopamine, right? So just like a pendulum swinging, what we don't want to do is swing all the way to the dopamine side, okay? Because whenever we do that, okay, and we're living in this like dopamine, high, constant, go, 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 all the happy hormones, what will actually happen is we can actually build resistance to dopamine. Our receptors actually start to weaken and they break down. And then what happens is we cannot receive the dopamine. Like our dopamine receptors stop working. And so now we need more. That's the reason why addiction even exists. Because it's our body's way of saying, hold on, we need more contrast. So you have to be able to work together in order to achieve this harmony within your body. So there's a part of your brain, and let's talk about this kind of like with addiction and with dopamine and with all of these things. We're going to call it the reward pathway, okay? This is kind of the core of your addiction, okay? The main highway is the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, all right? It starts in the ventral tegmental area. We'll call it the VTA. It's deep in the midbrain, okay? And the dopamine neurons travel from the VTA to the nucleus accumbens. All right? The brain's pleasure center, okay? The surge of dopamine is what makes something feel rewarding, okay? So whenever you're normally like, and this is why you keep on needing more, right? So normally dopamine rewards healthy behaviors. So like when you're hungry and you eat, well, you need that to sustain health, right? So it's like, oh, here's some dopamine. You should be enjoying this. Social bonding, accomplishments, dopamine is a great thing whenever it's done in a correct order. But addictive behaviors flooding the system, over time, the brain reduces dopamine receptors. So meaning you feel less pleasure from the same hit. And that's the reason why through building this tolerance, you need more to get the same feeling. And that's where you can get stuck in this addictive state. So the prefrontal cortex, this is a different part of your brain that I just talked about. This is kind of the CEO of your brain. This is where your decision-making, your self-control, your long-term vision, okay? This is really where your fulfillment, your purpose lives. Okay, so you really want to activate this part of your brain. And in addiction, your dopamine overload weakens the prefrontal cortex because your body, if you're constantly sending and creating more of this as your pleasure center as being like the center of your life, and you're constantly trying to feed this, then you're not actually able to activate your prefrontal cortex. Your VTA completely hijacks your brain, and you're constantly living in this like, I need more, and you just start having these cravings for this. So you have to be able to stop all of these things, right? So I actually became really so excited about all of this because it just became like fascinating to me, like understanding the necessity of all these different hormones and how they play off of each other. And so as I started putting it together and learning about this through the course of the last, honestly, 2 decades, like it's been about 20 years now that I started learning about all of this and how it worked together. I learned about it in therapy, read a lot of books about it, did some certifications, just trying to understand more about like the science. And as I started connecting the dots, I created a course about it. And that course is really something that is passionate about my purpose and because it really takes like, I've just been trying to understand what's going on in my life as I've faced a lot of these things. And one thing that has been a huge compliment to me that people have said is, you're really resilient. And I mean, to be completely honest, I didn't ever feel like I had a chance not to be. I think through the series of decisions that I've made with having all of my kids and the way that I just genuinely wanted them to learn, and it made me want to learn a lot about a lot of this because I can't teach it if I don't understand it and I don't know it. And then I started realizing just through the career that I had, I've talked to a lot of women, and I started realizing like there is a real need for this. This is a real thing that information that people don't have. And I started seeing just in society how we are constantly being fed all of this other information. And I'm like, we really need something to help. And so this course that I'm building is really explaining like and how to create like the coping skills and how to give a little bit better the information necessary for you to do live a more fulfilling life. So anyways, I'm going to be talking more about that. I don't want this whole thing to be talking about my course. I will go into that at a later date. Just understand that I'm in the process of building it. I'm really excited about it. If by the time you've heard this podcast, I will eventually have it linked below in all of my podcasts. So if you see a link down there, then I made it and it's here. But and then you can learn a little bit more about it. But I didn't want to make this all about that. I really wanted to make it this all about embracing the struggle. So hopefully this just kind of made you learn. And what I kind of talked about earlier, whenever I set this whole precedent of what I wanted you to experience, is I didn't want you to shy away from struggle so much. I wanted you to see its purpose and really understand that you've been given an opportunity. If you've been given an opportunity to live a passionate life, to live a life that actually has harmony and lives in balance, with all of these different things. So as much as you want to seek the pleasure, make sure you're seeking and understanding the contrast of that, okay? And that is what's going to build the ultimate strong foundation for you. So I hope that helps. I hope today helped in achieving that for you today. Okay? All right. Until next time, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. This has been super fun. All right. Bye-bye.